Hi, I am your host, Danielle Smith.
And my name's Danny Tivalu, and welcome to our podcast.
It's Glow Time.
We'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land that we meet upon today, the Yugambeh and Komameri people, paying our respects to the elders past, present and emerging, acknowledging that this always was and always will be Aboriginal land.
This is Danny Smith here for It's Glow Time with my beautiful co-host, Danny Tivalu.
Hey friends, how you doing?
And we have a beautiful guest this week, a good friend of mine who, God, I've known for 15 years. I was doing the math the other day. The beautiful goddess Alex James. So she'll be joining us today, who is a women leadership empowerment coach, would you say?
Yeah. That's
a
pretty good description.
Yeah, awesome. Okay. So thanks again so much for joining us. I'm so excited to hear all about the work that you're doing and your experience in life so far. So thought how we'd first get started off with just telling us a little bit about what type of work you do for women at the moment.
Yeah, thanks, Danny. And oh my gosh, so funny, the intros, whenever I listen to podcasts, and you always hear the guest getting a little bit like blushing at the intro, and that totally just happens. I'll take it.
Receive.
Receive. Gracious. Thank you. So the work I do with women at the moment, I'm working mostly with executive women. I have been working with women mostly in leadership and founders and professional women, some business owners for the past few years. And I work one-to-one with them. I work with them for a minimum of sort of 3 to 4 months, and I've now brought that up to 6 months, and we go really deep because I love going deep. I don't like the kind of shallow one-off kind of session coaching. So I spend 4 months minimum with these clients, and we transform how she sees herself. We look at her desires. We uncover, the things that have been holding her back. And that can be everything from that she's under earning. It can be in her relationships that she's not, that she's holding back from being vulnerable in those, or holding back from dating, or holding back from moving up into leadership in her careers. It really spans every single area. And it depends on the woman and where she's at. And we go all the way back to childhood a little bit in the beginning, but then we mostly focus on where she's heading and what she wants. And we help her create a life that fulfills her.
Wow, sounds so cool. So you pretty much just get to recreate the life that the woman that you see that she can create, but just helping her to see that she can actually create that. Is that kind of
that is
what I'm picking up?
Summary.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Where do you think like the biggest resistance is around preventing the woman from getting to where you can see that she can potentially get to, or definitely get to?
The resistance, it can come from a lot of different places. There's a lot of fear. Fear is the biggest one, and then that stems from a lot of different places. So there's a lot of conditioning, like for women specifically, there's a lot of conditioning and rules and beliefs around what is possible for her, what she should do, what she shouldn't do. So it's a lot of like deconditioning what she believes is possible. And I think that there's societal expectations as well as parental expectations. And then there's just the human part. So not all of it is specific for women. It's as humans, I mean, we even have psychologically like negative bias, right? Which means we focus 10 times more on those negative things than we do on positive. And there is an element of needing to like retrain ourselves or consciously choose to focus on the positive things if we want to move towards and create the life we want and the things that we desire, because we are wired to focus on those more negative aspects.
Mm. And how did you first come to coaching? Like what kind of led you to the workspace you're in now?
Yeah, so I was always in leadership. So I started my first leadership role when I was 21. I was working for General Pants, and I'd started as a salesperson and worked my way up. And then by sort of 21, I was managing teams like 25 to 30 people and had incredible training. And it was funny. It's not until looking back a few years ago that I realized even back then what I was doing, I would hire a lot of women. It was their first job and they were 16 years old. And I would actually nurture and coach and mentor them to become leaders themselves. So I'm still actually connected with and friends with a few of these women that I literally hired as they had never had a job before and trained up to be women. And that was a theme that I hired and trained up to be leaders. And that was a theme that ran through my whole career. So I was even doing that in my last role. So it was through kind of reflecting. Then in the last sort of 5 years, I was in a sales role, sales leadership role, and I knew I was unhappy. Knew that I really didn't want to be in sales, but I was so frustrated that I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I knew I loved the leadership coaching capacity of my roles, but I didn't see an opportunity of how to like really only harness that, because every role required that you also do the sales and also do all these other parts. So I was quite lost in that. And interestingly, it's one of these cliche things, because I actually was one of these light bulb in a moment scenarios, because I was with my brother at a bar whinging to him that I was my role and
focusing on the negative. No.
Yeah, like I was completely focused on the negative, whinging, and my brother and I get along super well, and he was actually getting super frustrated with me, which is very rare. And anyway, we were walking to the car after I'd been bitching for this whole time, and he said, well, I don't know, why don't you be a coach or an interior decorator? And I turned to him and I went, what do you mean? That's exactly what I want to do. but I can't be a coach. I said, but I can't be a coach. I don't have enough experience. And he sort of went, reflected, why not? Like, why don't you look into it? And anyway, that was kind of what started the path. And then I started studying coaching on the side of my full-time job, and one thing led to another from there.
Wow, that's so cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So so that point that you had that light bulb moment, did you get a sense of, like you said, it was like a light bulb moment, but did the fear and self-doubt still trickle in for ages before you were able to let go to really step into that, full feminine power of, okay, I'm going to take this by the balls and I'm going to just become this coach?
Oh my gosh, 100%. So it wasn't you have like light bulb and then everything that falls into place. No, it was a mess. I was expecting it for so long. There were tears. There was, so much second guessing, so much doubt, so much. It was probably still 2 years, and it still comes up occasionally, questioning, is this right? Like when that fear comes up, and it's just the longer it goes, the more you're able to be conscious of those thoughts and see them for what they are, that they're just thoughts. But yeah, there was a long journey in between that space or after that moment of watching that actually unfold, for sure.
So how do you think you actually got to that state to be able to, I know now, I still, sometimes there's still fear that pops in, and I know that when I'm not looking after myself or I let my self-care routine go, then that's when the fear kind of steps in. But what tools or things or processes did you go through to help you to keep on pushing forward and to step into the fear, kind of like facing it and pursuing it anyway?
Great question. I think it helped that I was simultaneously studying coaching. So I was simultaneously learning how, how to master human behavior and our psychology. I think at that period, I was very consistent in my meditation practice. I was meditating every single day, up to an hour. That was really consistent for me. I had a lot of, by that stage, I had really embodied a lot of that kind of really like grounded self-awareness. I was still, but that was being peaked and interrupted by these spikes of intense stress with my job in corporate. So I was really doing that to cope and to balance, but it did also help me keep coming back to an alignment with what was intuitively right for me. And I think the biggest thing that I reflect on, and actually is still my life philosophy today, is there's certain things in my life where I feel if I can feel this intense energy or I can sense that's right for me, I make a conscious choice to say yes to it and decide and be all in. And then I worry about the how, because I think what so many people do is we get so caught up in like, but how am I going to make this work first? Like they actually want to find out what the steps are going to be and like, how can I do it and work it all out and see that there's a successful outcome before they commit. But I've learned to like really turn that on its head. And so I now go, okay, no, I'm going to commit and I'm going to trust myself that the rest will work out. So I think bringing myself back to that kind of philosophy, being in silence for enough time that I could bring myself back to my intuition, and having that meditation practice and that exploration of, I was reading Eckhart Tolle at the time and things like that. So I was able to separate my thoughts and know that I wasn't identifying with the thoughts and the stories that I was telling myself.
Funny, I saw a post that you did the other day about that, around like just figure out the how to after, but just say yes in some, if it feels right. And I actually had a moment 2 days ago where I needed to make a business decision and I was like, I don't know how I'm going to make this happen, but you came to my head and I went, yes, Alex said yes, so I'm just going to do it and I'm going to figure it out later. So I've committed to this project. I don't know how it's going to work, but I'm going to do it.
Oh, I love it, Danny. That's awesome. Yeah, it's an interesting one. Do you know that's actually that life philosophy? I've actually triggered a couple of people really strongly through that. And it's really interesting to watch because it's that actually to me shows how tightly wound and attached people are to the story that they need to know how first. It's like, no, you've got to trust yourself. You can figure that out.
And it also comes back to that whole, like, if you attach to the fear of like, of the unknown, of like, it can't happen, it can't possibly happen, then you pull in that reality into your life and you end up creating those, I suppose, blockages and things. So if you can step into it, visualize it and happen, be like, no, it's going to happen. I don't know how, but it just will. Just trusting and surrendering. Like that's when really the magic happens. But it's hard to do sometimes. So is there any advice that you can give to people in that? Like I know you mentioned meditation, but are there some other tools and things that you can advise people to be stronger at doing those, that having that sort of action?
Really, in the context of say yes and figure out how, and really in the context of a lot of different areas, that comes down to self-trust. And the self-trust, so the thing with women is that specifically and a lot, everyone, but specifically with women, is the self-trust thing is huge a lot of the time because they have been conditioned or they are acting in a very hyper-masculine kind of energy and paradigm. So deep down, they're actually not trusting their feminine. So the how is actually a masculine energy thing. So going to the how first, one is a distraction, but two, they're challenged by just saying yes first because they don't trust themselves, because there's an element in them where they don't trust the feminine that surrenders. They don't even know what the being feminine is. They have no idea what that part is. And their perception of it is it's weak, it's soft, it's a bit flighty, it's, floral, it's, nurturing, but it's not strong, it's not capable, it's not something to trust. So to circle that back, it's like, it's actually a lot of deep work. It's less strategies of do this and do that. It's more you actually need to learn to really trust yourself, to learn about the feminine, like what that energy is, the power in it, learn to embody it. One of, if I was going to say strategies, I think when it comes to self-trust and really being able to lead your life with that kind of philosophy is really learning self-integrity, which for women, it's a lot of, they can tend to self-abandon a lot of the time. And that's things like saying yes when they really mean no, not honoring boundaries. It's all that type of thing that actually takes them away from that self-trust.
Yeah, right. And so for people that don't know, because I think it's only been the last couple of years that I've really delved into like feminine and masculine energy, but there's people out there that don't really know what that means. So how would you describe, what is healthy feminine energy and healthy masculine energy?
So look, there's a lot of different resources. I would say, and the thing to really preface this with is that we all have masculine and feminine energy. So every man has feminine and masculine energy, and every woman has feminine and masculine energy. The thing is that, especially in cities, like bigger cities, there's more masculine energy. And then also when you're in these kind of corporate and business environments, again, that's more masculine energy. And socially, we have the masculine energy has been more rewarded. So masculine energy it's building things, it's doing things in a linear fashion. It is, it's more assertive and action oriented. And then the feminine is more, it's the receiving energy, and it is nurturing, and it has boundaries, and it's creative, and it's playful, and it's appreciating beauty, and it's nature, and it's that balance of the yin and the yang, where they go from, and I love that you said healthy masculine and feminine versus unhealthy. It's like most people recognize the unhealthy. Like most people, when they think of masculine or feminine, will go to the more unhealthy types. For women, that's like manipulation. It's people pleasing, which actually really is a form of manipulation. It's over emotionality, like not being able to really sit with emotion, becoming needy. And for men, it's the hyperaggression. It's, again, not showing any emotion, being too rigid, being overly aggressive, and that type of thing.
So with you mentioned before around like the people pleasing tendencies and I suppose the self-sacrificing, is that something that you witness a lot of with the women that you work with?
Oh my gosh, all the time. So it's one of the most common, it's usually one of the first things we untangle. It's the most common, most easily mentioned, because I think that one is the most pervasive through every system that we've grown up with. So even as young girls, our parents, who were doing the best they knew how to do with the resources they had, saw or could have seen the young girls as the ones that were there to please, that they needed them to be good girls, and that was also the good girl was kind of what you were taught to be, like be nice, be polite,
be quiet, be seen and not heard.
It's reinforced throughout society's expectations as well.
Exactly. So that one's through everywhere. It's like from parents to schools to workplaces to media to the movies we were watching. I mean, it's even the fact my mum actually, which people love this story, when I was growing up, she wouldn't let me watch Disney movies. It was like, that is not reality, and that is not a good model of what women should want in life, or that
Oh, that's so cool.
What do you mean? The prince is not coming on the horse to come and rescue me? What? No.
So, yeah, she was pretty ruthless. She's like, nah, we're not watching that tripe.
Wow. So do you think how do you feel like her influence like, yeah, were you brought up with maybe the same, do you think, expectations to be a good girl like a lot of people were?
No, so I think that's where it's a little bit different for me. It definitely came through. I still certainly felt it for sure, because there was a lot of unconscious parts going on for them. But my mother was definitely a feminist. Like, she kept her maiden name. I mean, she's the epitome of practicality. She wore a cream suit to their wedding so she could wear it to work. She worked in IT management for Westpac. And, you know, I was dressed in tracksuits and had a mullet cut in my hair. You know, so
please provide some pictures on the mullet.
Oh yeah, I will. It's funny because occasionally when I see myself in a dress, I think, oh, that must have been a gift from a relative that we must have been visiting that day. And I was quite girly, and she didn't love that. But what's interesting is it really shaped me, because in a powerful way, in that I had a very strong sense of, I guess, that kind of feminist ideal. And yet she worked 80 hours a week, would come home and, like, you know, cook for the whole family. She was the typical superwoman that we describe these days, but she did it all. And since becoming a coach and working specifically with women, me really realizing she actually, while a feminist standing for empowerment of women, was so in her masculine energy to be able to, like a lot of these super women are, you know, they have to be, to work all these hours, to provide in this way, to be these strong women. They actually end up rejecting a lot of the parts of them that are feminine, which is like to relax and for things to be easeful and create their creativity and all those parts as well, and receiving. So it was really interesting. She absolutely, well, both her and my father shaped me in many ways, because my father as well is very admiring and respectful of women. He was an absolute gentleman with my mother, and they had a very, very mature relationship that wasn't perfect.
But I don't think any relationship is, though, and I think that's the more and more message that keeps coming through, because back to the Disney movies, you have these like, and rom-coms as this like happily ever after, but they never actually show what happens in the happily ever after. And, you know, healthy relationships are ones with challenges and, you know, working on communications and stuff. So I really love that you brought that up, because it is.
Because they've been still together, but, you know, not perfect. Yeah, they're still together. They've been together, oh gosh, I don't know how many years now. They're super cute. They're sweet together. Yeah, but yeah, it's not been perfect, and they've had hard patches, and they weren't afraid of showing that to us. That is the reality.
I'm
Is
sorry.
that Huey and Georgie?
Oh, I'm so sorry. That's my little puppy. He's just like, I let him out and he was barking up a storm downstairs. And I was like, maybe if he's up here, he'll be quiet.
Extra guest appearance.
I know. Yeah.
This is Huey, our third co-host. Oh no, Georgie, our third co-host.
He's very cute. He's just a little bit annoying at times.
Oh, I love it.
Sorry to interrupt that.
So one of the areas that you work on is boundaries. And so I know when this word kind of came into my orbit, maybe like 8 or 9 years ago, that was one of the things that, I really noticed that I wasn't doing. But I found that there was this big like dance between like boundaries, where I first was like, oh, I have to be so rigid and no one can cross my boundary, and then you become so stuck, but then that's going against that whole feminine energy. So it was a real dance and balance to try and still instill your boundaries, but then also have it quite relaxed and feminine. So not that you're relaxed in letting people cross it, but not being so stoic and you know, and tough around it in terms of your energy. So how, because I don't even know how I managed to figure out how to do it, but I feel like I have managed to do that a little bit better. What are some things that you could recommend to women when they're doing, you know, trying to hold their boundaries, but doing it from a more of a heart space than a, you know, rigid defense space?
Yeah, excellent question. So, oh gosh, there's so much I could say about boundaries. The first thing around that is, yeah, a boundary is meant to be, it's a malleable, flexible line versus a wall. And the reason that when people put them up as either like brick fortresses, that's from a place of a lack of self-trust, especially when they've gone from having none. So then they feel like the only way they can force it is if they put up the wall, because they're afraid that if there has to be kind of conversation that they won't be able to handle that. So again, it comes back to that kind of grounded self-trust. It's really untying the conditioning around the people pleasing, because so the people pleasing it's often actually a trauma response. And so you actually have to heal the trauma response, because what you're fearing, what that people can be fearing in people pleasing, with, you know, like the fear, freeze, fight, flight.
Yeah.
There's also fawn. And fawn is the people pleasing part. It's the, okay, what do I need to do to make myself safe by just like changing who I am and what I'm doing and pleasing what other people, you know, need from me, doing what other people need from me. So healing that part and actually creating a feeling of safety in your nervous system to say no. So it's not as easy as telling someone, well, you need to say no. It's like, for a lot of women, they actually need to heal and recalibrate their nervous system to recognize that it's safe, that they're actually safe to say no, because there's an inner child in them there that can be really genuinely frightened. The other part of that, once kind of that piece is done, is I love helping people actually create a structure to start with, but then it becomes more of a flow in how to communicate a boundary, especially when it's in a bit more, like sometimes it could be easy, but other times it could be a bit more difficult, and how to actually have that conversation in a way where you're being vulnerable and you're also inviting the other person in. And it's not just, here's my boundary, do not cross it, but it's actually expressing to them how you feel and why the boundary is there, if it's appropriate, because on the other flip side, no is a complete sentence. And there's some circumstances where no or no thank you, full stop, is enough. And then there's other ones where you might want to have a conversation that's saying like, look, here's what my needs are. Here's what, you know, here's what I value in this relationship. Here's what I ideally would love for the vision of our relationship. Here's where I see this relationship going. And what I need from you is this. And here's what I'm asking. So this is what I need. This is my ask. So there's a couple of different parts, like healing the part that feels unsafe to have the boundary, developing a communication structure or format that just feels good to you, and then practice.
And just to circle back to like what you were saying about people pleasing before, because like I've definitely I've done a lot of work on myself, like unraveling that habit and rewiring that. What do you feel is often like the root cause of people pleasing? Like, I know you mentioned it before, the effects of where it takes you with your nervous system, etc. But what do you often, or working with your clients, have you found is the most common denominator?
Yeah. So it's usually, so if we come back to that fawn piece, this is usually childhood conditioning. And because when we are babies, we need I call them magical big people instead of our parents, because for everyone they might not refer to them as their parents, but these two, and as a baby, they're these magical big people, and you rely on these magical big people to survive, and you need them for food and water and shelter. And as children, effectively are scanning for information as to what you need to do, like what behaviors are appropriate or inappropriate and how to make those magical big people happy. And each of those magical big people had a list of things that they had decided were appropriate and not appropriate. And really, at the end of the day, that was what they needed. So whatever the parent needed to feel like to serve their needs were projected onto us as a child. So as a child, we became this, as kids, especially in our imprint years, like 0 to 7, become hyper vigilant as to how to meet the needs of these big people, these magical big people, in order to survive. So effectively, that's kind of where it stems from. And then really want is to be liked by you, which is actually meeting my own need, but I get to tell myself that it's because I'm a nice person, I want to do it for you, which is, it's damaging from both ends, because it creates in people pleasers this really deep resentment.
Sorry, something just happened with Zoom.
Okay.
All good. It's just that recording is going on.
Yeah, okay. Continuing on.
I was like, oh, did it just start?
Yeah. Well, I just what you said before though about people pleasing, because I definitely had moments where like I've got a like big self-reflection practice, and yeah, I'd reflect and be like, oh, like I'd realize my people pleasing's coming out there, and I need to step back from a situation, be like, okay, so I really want that person to like me, like why is that, and like kind of step back until I figured it out and go, okay, well, like I'm going to still interact with them though, so how can I reapproach this situation or this scenario in a more healthy manner for myself, because like I made a promise to myself that I would be who I am, and be myself. And I was fine with I'm fine if people don't like me how I am. I'm still going to try to be a good person and kind and all of that. And it doesn't mean I have to agree with someone, and it doesn't mean I have to disagree with them in a rude way either. But yeah, it's just interesting. Like, it's nice to hear what you were saying then. And I suppose, yeah, it really resonated.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, there's so many layers to this, and I'm always so conscious. I when I speak to women, because it's so conditioned and it's really such a complex part. And for a lot of women, the first part is actually knowing what they want. And they've been so heavily taught to please others that there's often a gap there between stopping people pleasing, but then they're in that space, they're going, but I don't actually know what I want.
What do I do with all this extra time I have?
Yeah, well, and I'm so used to focusing on what everyone else wants. I've never asked myself that.
Yeah,
I have no idea.
The thing there is, it's like you ask some people about, like, even when it comes to like values, or like, you know, because everyone has goals, and like, you're like, I want to achieve this kind of thing, but sometimes those goals are attached to other people and what they think they want them to achieve. And so, yeah, a lot of people don't ever take the time just to sit there to be like, what are my basic human needs? Like, what do I need? What do I want to achieve? What do I want my life to look like? And it's, yeah, I think it's such an important thing for us to do, like, not even just women, just men as well, to take the time to respect their time and to figure out who they are. And, you know, and yeah, once they move past that, you know, that attachment to, you know, people pleasing, because that is really a distraction as well. Like, when people are scared to sit with themselves a lot of the time as well, because they don't know who they are, and they're scared of who they might be. And so that is like a projection and a distraction as well.
Oh my gosh, 100%. Yeah, I was writing about that today, actually. That's a lot of the women that I work with, and men too, absolutely. They've followed this path of what society's taught them that they should do and are meant to do, and what their parents wanted for them, and just really fitting into that box. And so they feel so secure in that place that leaving that box feels terrifying. And if they so scary. If they spend too much time in stillness, they're frightened of realizing that they don't want everything they've worked so hard for.
I think that's the biggest thing, like, and the scariest thing as well, like when you have put so much time and energy into achieving something and you have that moment of like, I don't think I even want this. Like, that was like when I used to work in the corporate world back in Sydney, like a decade ago. I thought I was on this trajectory of like climbing the corporate ladder and like, oh, I've achieved this. But then when I was getting there, it's like, like, it's almost like you get suffocated because you're like, I don't think I want this. This is what people were telling me that I wanted. And I, you know, it was so like lack of freedom. And yeah, so it's really scary once you have that moment of that realization, and how to navigate that is also very challenging.
Oh my gosh, totally. And because I think there's this really strong story in, well, our generation. I think new generation it's totally different, but our generation, there's this really strong story. It's like, if you leave that, if you follow your passion, your options, you're probably going to be destitute. Like, you can do that, but you're going to be poor, right? And your family are probably going to reject you. So like, if you want to be a poor person, that's fine. Go follow your passion. But that's sort of what has felt like the option, you know. And you do have those, you know, the safety and the comfort of a corporate salary, and, you know, the being a part of the tribe and the ego of the title and all the nice things you get to buy.
The corporate Amex card.
Exactly. Like getting to have like fancy client lunches. Like, it's such a mix of the ego plus getting to stay within the tribe, which is a, you know, really strong inherent drive. And then often it's also that you fear that rejection from parents or not being approved of for that path.
I remember being in that environment, and like I was scared to show my quirkiness and my, you know, my craziness, and it would be like, you know, I was always known as the girl that had all these weird healthy potions on their desk. Like, everyone would come to me if they had like, you know, a sniffle or something, because I had all of this stuff on my desk. But then it was always such a club of like going and having, you know, going for drinks and, you know, and having to, you know, put the time into those, you know, Friday Arvo drinks to like move up the ladder and things. And even if you didn't want to do that, there was this pressure to do that. So I'd always like hide my glow, and yeah, it just felt so suffocating in that environment. And I think there's so many people that are still feeling like that. And so like, what advice could you give them if they're feeling that sense of suffocation and feel like they're hiding themselves?
Wow, yeah. So it's really interesting you bring this up specifically because this is something that I'm really challenging myself to talk a lot more about on LinkedIn right now. So one of the things that I'd previously noticed that I was doing on LinkedIn was actually almost going back into an old habit of thinking, okay, well, LinkedIn is professional, so I need to put myself back put my professional hat back on, which I was always very excellent at doing. And then I realized, actually, no, I want to trigger these people. I want to set off these people's judgments. I've just spent years moving from being fearful of people's judgments to realizing I don't care what people think of me. And I realized that, you know, going back into that professional paradigm, I saw myself want to, like, this automatic slip of, oh, okay, I need to fit into that, what is professional again. Anyway, so I've been really exploring that and challenging myself with that and going, oh, no, how can I really trigger these people in this professional paradigm? How can I actually invite their judgments? So I'm actually showing up there a lot more kind of feminine in photos that I wouldn't consider professional, and talking about, I did a post recently that became very popular about the pressure to drink in corporate environments and go out drinking. That was one of the things that I really started to struggle with. The demand and expectation on your time outside of work, on, you know, having to be a part of, like the boys club or the culture, and to really climb the ladder, it's sort of expected in a lot of those environments that you're there and show up for those. So
It's almost like a
What
career
I
death wish if you don't go and participate.
Totally. And so what I'm kind of inviting, what I'm leaning into inviting people to do now is to really go, okay, you know, as women, we've spent all this time showing that we can do these roles, that we deserve a seat at the table, and we've got that. The problem is we've done that in a way by acting like men and accepting the culture as it is, which was designed by men for men, understandably, because up until now it was all men. So that kind of makes sense. So really unconsciously, what we define as professional is effectively acting like a man or being in a masculine energy. So I think it's a lot of, I kind of think it's up to a lot of the women in these environments to challenge the status quo, to, you know, honor their boundaries and say no and become more in alignment with who they are in these workplaces, and instead of falling into the trap of simply accepting things the way that they are and putting themselves back into a little box to be accepted. And that's not going to fly everywhere for sure, but also I challenge us to whether if it's a company where you can't be your whole self, is it worth being there?
I think it's cool as well because that it challenges, I suppose, like there's a lot of masculine institutions and organizations in our society. Like look at the government, look at the way most businesses are run. Even I'm a school teacher by day, like the way schooling systems are run, it can be very rigid and like one way suits all, which I think, like, you know, there's definitely huge merit for like rigidity at times and sticking to your guns, but I feel it'd be beautiful to see a little bit more like femininity and that kind of understanding and empathy coming in to balance the two.
Absolutely. And that's the thing, that's the one thing possibly that sets me apart a little bit in the space that I'm in, is a lot of women that are in the space of female empowerment kind of talk about it, you know, women ruling the world, and that, you know, that maybe a matriarch is the solution, and, you know, kind of slip into this man bashing. And it's not how I see things at all. Both are so valuable. And I love men, you know, that rigidity and that linear. We've got to remember, like, the patriarchy, these roles that we're now having the opportunity to fill were created by the patriarchy. They exist because of the patriarchy for us to be able to have them. And it's a beautiful opportunity to bring in more of the, like, the ease and the fluidity and the emotionality and the empathy to these spaces. And that actually serves men and women to do that.
I'm so glad that you brought that. I was actually going to bring that up before you, as you mentioned it, because it's like there's this whole thing about, you know, when you're being a feminist or, like, you know, women empowerment, that there is this culture of man hating, and I absolutely hate that, because that's not the case. Like, men are amazing and they need to be, you know, put up and respected as well. And it's about, I think, joining in together and respecting each other's strengths and figuring out how to exist together in the most beautiful, harmonious way. And, you know, figuring out that each of us speaks so differently. Like, we have different communication skills, we have different strengths and weaknesses, and it's, I think, collaborating and coming together. And that's one of the biggest messages I always try and put through, is it's about rising the both of us up together, and and not bashing each other down at all.
100%. Absolutely. I am so passionate about that. And the rising up together and the harmony is language I use myself, because, you know, and I actually fell into coaching women specifically. I initially thought I was going to coach men in helping them kind of embrace women more and, you know, heal that relationship. And it didn't work out that way. But I just wholeheartedly agree. I think, you know, especially having a father and a brother like I have, who absolutely embody and express such a healthy, incredible masculine energy, I find it really disappointing and disheartening when it's really become commonplace for women to put down men. And I even have a problem with, you know, terms like toxic masculinity being used so frequently, you know, to label it as toxic.
And not even when it's valid either. Like,
I don't even know what it means.
Yeah.
And, you know, when I hear that, I go, okay, cool. Do you know what toxic femininity is?
It's like right back at you. I even noticed as well, like, I'm quite conscious because, like, you know, when I've noticed that there's like quite a few single women that I know, and sometimes you hear them like going, oh, there's no men are fucked and like blah blah, and I'm always like so quick to pick up. I'm like, no, like, you may have had a bad experience with a man, but it doesn't mean that all men are fucked. And like, if you've got that language and if you've got that energy around it, then that's what you're going to be drawing in. So you, like, you know, I think be careful with your words, be careful with, you know, the type of descriptions that you're doing, and, you know, come from the heart space and back to, you know, that compassion and kindness.
Do you know what, Denny? What you just described was actually one of the first articles I ever wrote in my business. It was my call for women to stop saying there's no good men out there, and was really talking about the language that single women use. And the other part for me is it's really disempowering regardless, because the other piece is women aren't seeing they're playing a part. You know, we are playing a part in the problem, and really relegating all the responsibility and all the problem to another gender doesn't help anyone, you know. Because it doesn't call them forth.
Comes back to self-responsibility as well. Sorry, Denny, what were you going to say?
I just know as well, it can, interestingly enough, be our behaviors and habits which are actually drawing in the wrong type of people, which could even stem from something like people pleasing, because you might find yourself drawn to the wrong personalities because of a poor habit or like pattern you've allowed into your life. And then really, like, you can say, oh, there's no good men out there, but perhaps you're not seeing them. There's a lot of good men out there, actually. Just like, are you seeing them? Do you find them attractive? And like, maybe if you don't, what is it that you find attractive? Like, what's attractive to you? Like, is it a kind, like, respectful man? Or is it someone who's going to not treat you very well, but reinforce a pattern that you are used to now?
It's like, comes back to your nervous system of like what's familiar to it. And I think it's like the story that you tell yourself is generally the pattern and the habit that you know get caught into. And it's like sometimes it's unconscious, like you don't even know that you're doing it. Taking the time and space to, I suppose, figure out and decipher those conditioning, and because if you've got a, you know, like some sort of like negative people pleasing connotation in one area, then it's going to filter into all areas. So I suppose you might be working with women in a business perspective, but it's going to transfer into their whole other areas of life, I'd imagine, as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's why I describe my work as holistic, because, you know, I really have no interest in just talking about the career. You know, I spend a lot of time talking about their relationships and every area. I mean, the thing is, there's so few women are spending time to learn about men. And I think this also comes back to, if we look back at, you know, these Disney movies and how relationships were portrayed, and women are walking into relationships having these expectations that are unrealistic, and they're not opening themselves to understanding men and their differences. There's this idea that they want men to fit the typical masculine ideal, but then they also want them to act like women. It's like they want them to provide and be masculine and a man and have the testosterone, but they also want them to be totally open with their emotions and their feelings, and communicate their intimacy, and be their best friend and their lover and their provider. And, you know, it's kind of wild.
There's a few good books I read over the last couple of years. It's the The Queen's Code. Have you read that?
Do you know what? That's been on my list. I haven't read that one yet, but I have read a few good ones. What else have you read?
It's really good. Like it's all about like the language that men use in describing, and like from a women's perspective of, you know, just using little different situations where, like, you know, we can come across as a nag for saying it, but if we use different language, then we're speaking to their heart more. And so it's just about like bringing that to the surface of like understanding that we do communicate differently. So that was a really good, it's very easy read. But even David Data, The Way to the Superior Man, I think that book's really cool. Because I realized maybe like 10 years ago that I didn't know how to understand a man. It's, you know, because I'm a woman, and so taking the time to read those books like changed my perception and my insight into men, and, you know, really appreciate, like, I've always appreciated them, but even like on a deeper level. And yeah, I think it's like you said, like a lot of women don't take the time to do that. And I think, yeah, just because, you know, if you want to be in a relationship, you need to understand them. So definitely taking the time to do that it just will give you the relationship or the kind of thing that you want, but also, you know, give the space for a man to show up as well if you're in your, you know, essence of femininity. And so
yeah, that's a great book, The Way the Superior Man. I read a few, probably the ones that stand out to me, The Way the Superior Man, Mating in Captivity by Esther Perel, and also Keys to the Kingdom, which
I read that one, Keys to the Kingdom. Yeah, I love that. Yeah,
that triggers a lot of women.
Yeah,
that one triggers a lot of women, but it's a good read. It's an interesting perspective. And then there's a few different ones for feminine, but yeah, I love that as well. Like learning about the man's perspective is so important. So few women are doing that.
Mm-hmm. So we are here on It's Glow Time. We love talking about adversity. It's one of our favorite topics. So has there been anything in your life that has been a big challenge for you that's kind of been a turning point to get you onto the road that you are on, and how it's helped, I suppose, to shape you and to impact your life?
Yeah, so adversity is an interesting one. So I think there's probably two periods of life where I probably felt like I experienced the most adversity. I mean, for the most part, I lived a very wonderful life. I was born to a wonderful family in the North Shore of Sydney, you know, and just had the general challenges of most kids growing up. But then there was probably a period in my teens where I think I experienced a lot of challenge as a teen. I really didn't like school. I really struggled at school and was really lost. And I feel like that's everyone's experience as a teen in terms of like not knowing who you are. But I was also quite a bit of I'd say a risk taker and a rule breaker. And so that brought on a few of my own challenges. I'd say one of the biggest pieces of adversity that I think probably shaped me was I had depression when I was, I think, 18. I fell into a quite deep depression and did have suicidal ideation. And that took me to, I was so super grateful that, you know, I was in the place that I did end up going to my mum and saying I needed help. And I was able to receive help from a psychiatrist and go on antidepressants and be able to regularly see a psychiatrist. And that actually really, I feel, was pivotal in my life for a number of reasons. I think one, knowing what that level of what mental illness feels like, having that experience has given me profound like compassion for people that have experienced that or are in that place. Secondly, I think the process of healing myself from that was probably the start of me realizing the power of our minds, and that I could transform from such a dark place to such an incredibly bright place that I live today and have lived since shortly after that time. And then also I would say an appreciation and love for life. I think I always had that. I mean, I was described as a kid with a real like joy to be, my dad would say, a real joy for life. But I think it gave me this extra love for it and appreciation for it, going through that and coming out the other side. So I'd say that's one of the bigger things. And then in terms of adversity, you know, look, I wouldn't call it adversity, but I'd say the second biggest, like really challenging period of my life was just before I started my own business and really being in that corporate world. And it was almost felt like an existential crisis that I started to go through. Like it was years of it felt like this soul sucking, like having to go through this spiritual exploration because I just felt so trapped and I didn't know how to get out. And I wouldn't describe it as adversity, but it was certainly a very challenging experience to feel like I was so trapped and suffocated from this world that was the only world that I knew, and was kind of really trying to find my way out of that.
Yeah, no, it's I think it's those moments when you have those soul-sucking experiences that you just come out the other end so much, you know, stronger. And we had a little voice memo chat the other day around like adversity, challenges, and identity. And I'd love to explore that a bit more, because you mentioned something that's really stuck with me the last day or so, because I was always such a big believer of like challenges and adversity, like it does help to shape you, but it's very easy to fall on and to hold on to that story, and that becomes your identity. And so for me, when I was younger, I was an overweight kid, and so I was a fat kid. And now reflecting on it, I held on to that story, I reckon, until my late 20s of like, oh, I was a fat kid. Oh, I always put on weight easily. Oh, I was a fat kid. And I attached so much to that story that became my identity. And there is a fine line between going through a challenge and a stress and still growing from that adversity and that challenge, but not attaching to that. And so how would you help people or explain to people about your views of that, of not, you know, becoming your story, or like not allowing your story to become your identity?
Yeah, so it's such an interesting one. I remember reading somewhere about depression. I can't remember who it was that said it, but they were speaking about depression. They sort of said, look, because my understanding was it's a chemical imbalance in the brain. That's sort of what I had been told. And then I read somewhere this guy sort of saying like, yeah, it can be that. And it also can be because you experience shit things in your life, and shit things have happened and it's really hard to deal with them. And that can also cause depression. And, you know, when I reflected and looked at some of the things that I had dealt with, and I was, you know, around sort of 15, 16, 17, I experienced a number of traumas and experiences, some of which were like sexual assault and sexual harassment. And I remember distinctly, I mean, the details of which I'm unsure. And I don't know where I got this from at the time, but I remember saying to myself, this isn't going to become my story. This isn't my story. It's an experience, but I'm not going to be a victim. And interestingly, I think our strengths are also our weaknesses. And so my strength was that I refused to be a victim. That is one of my parts. That can also become my shadow, because I charge on, you know, and that's probably what led to potentially the depression of like not receiving the support that I needed for the traumas and the things that I was experiencing. So now reflecting, and I look back, and now knowing and really understanding the profound impact with which the stories we tell ourselves has on our lives, I look back and realize how profound that decision as a teen, not really knowing what I was choosing at the time, was in my life. And I'm very conscious. I've always been, since a pretty young age, very conscious of what I say out loud and the stories I tell. And, really asking myself, is there a purpose to this? And what is my intention for sharing this and telling this story? Is it because I want to, am I attaching my identity to it? Do I think that it's necessary for someone to understand me to know that story? Because in that way, I'm making it more of my identity. You're right. And when it's our identity is the one thing that we will hold onto the strongest in everything we do. So anything that follows an I am, or anything that we really associate with as our identity, we seek to strengthen and find evidence for throughout our lives. So these stories that we tell ourselves about, I am just this type of person, or I always this, or, they're really powerful. And it's just as powerful to acknowledge them as stories and be able to consciously choose different ones that we desire for us to be, because we do get to choose what we identify with.
Yeah,
really cool.
I really like intention then as well, because I think it's so true. It's interesting when you develop a self-reflective practice, and then you begin to, I suppose, reflect as to what your intention is behind certain things, different actions, your habits, your behaviors, what you do and why you do it. And I think it can give you a better understanding of yourself, and potentially how you can rewire it to better align with where you want to be.
Yeah, intention's a huge one. And, it's still something I practice every single day, because I'm always, one of the things that I'm always doing is changing my identity. I'm always looking to, okay, who am I becoming? And what does that identity of me, how does she show up? How does she think? What does she do? And then, so that shapes my intention. And so in terms of intention, I'm always asking, especially in the space of social media, I'm constantly having to really check in with myself from a place of integrity and go, what's my intention here? Am I seeking validation?
Mm-hmm.
Am I seeking to impress, or am I seeking to inspire? Am I sharing this because I want people to validate my story, or do I desire connection, or is my intention here to lead and to empower and inspire? And is this really a necessary thing to share? So I think the context is important, and then the intention, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
So what other daily practices do you have that help you on your path of growth, empowerment, inspiration, that are non-negotiables for you?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So when people ask me this question, I have so many, but I'm very much a ritual person. I love flex. The thing that I always preface whenever I tell people my habits is that this is, especially bringing in the feminine energy, I used to be very rigid in my habits, and what it can become is just another box to tick. So there's this risk of people start meditating, and it's because then they get to check it off their list. And it's another thing to do. So whenever I share my practices, I'm always very intuitive with them and guided by them. And I check in with, actually, first, what does my intuition need? What do I desire? What feels good to me now? And I have a lot of practices that serve me at different times. So I'm an early riser, and I try and watch as many sunrises as possible, which La Nina has been a little bit of a challenge.
Yeah.
But I love to watch the sunrises. I do morning pages, which is from Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way. It's a streamed consciousness journaling practice. Meditation in all different types, and again, I sort of flow in and out, and what kind of I feel called to at the time, whether it's a guided, whether it's just a silent. I walk in nature a lot, usually daily. Exercise is massive for me. I do intentional journaling as well, a lot of future self visioning, and a lot of that kind of identity work and pulling out that type of thing. I'm consistently working with a coach myself. Clearly, I believe in coaching, and coaches have coaches. I like to make sure that I have someone kind of calling me to a higher level as well, and feeling that support for myself. Gosh, what else? Even just things like tea drinking. So I'm a big, like my tea and my coffee, and I try and create more like little rituals around daily tasks like that, you know, things that you do every day that can bring a little bit more mindfulness to them. But yeah, I'm very conscious of my health and my energy, and even far more so since starting my own business and being a coach. You know, I say I used to struggle kind of pulling back from drinking, and yet now, because I have such a strong.
Now here, unfortunately, Zoom dropped out on us, but Alex and I kind of continued talking about how when you feel so aligned with your purpose that you're really happy to let go of things that you may have been once attached to, but you know don't serve your higher self. Also,
totally. It's such a flip. Like in the past, it was, you know, I needed alcohol to, it was the only escape and relief. And now it's like, it just, I have a standard and a benchmark for how I show up for my business that it matters so much more that I don't tolerate that behavior for myself. Like I would never tolerate myself not showing up as my best for it. So yeah, you're right. It's this total flip on its head that does sort of reflect, you know, that I am kind of on purpose, and I love what I do, and I feel very grateful to do it.
Yeah, it sounds like you've made like a lot of meaningful change as well, and like inspired a lot of people to like live in their alignment. And yeah,
it brings me so much joy. It's crazy, Danny. Like I feel, honestly, I get brought to tears of gratitude all the time, which is so crazy. I remember in my life in the past thinking when people cry tears of joy, I always thought that was such a weird thing.
What a wank.
And you're like, I'm one of them now.
It's so over emotional. That's so weird. And now I get it, because I get these clients that it's really difficult to describe the relationship that's created and the impact that I get to have. I can feel getting emotional now, like some of these women that I've worked with and the changes I've helped them that they've created and I've simply got to facilitate. But it's mind blowing.
I think that's the biggest thing around, you know, the person that chooses to get a coach, like, because I think there's a difference between, you know, paying someone to tell you what to do, whereas coaching, it's like you're holding them to a high standard, but you're actually they still have to do the work. Like you're not just coming to them and be like, do this, do this, do this, do this. It's like you're creating that space and that facilitating that environment for them to heal and to move, but they're still having to do the work as well, which is beautiful because they're having changes, and it's not just a dictatorship, which I think is really important to know the difference with that. And it's like you can, you know, facilitate and create such beautiful transformations and changes for these women and have these emotional experiences and things. But it's such great work that you're doing, Alex.
Oh, thank you so much. And yeah, that's right. I think there's a lot of coaches, and it's especially why I would never call myself a business coach, because they're often the ones directing to do all these things. And a lot of the women that come to me, because they're so ambitious, they want that. They think they want that, but it's not what it is. You know, it's about empowering them and helping them realize that they hold the power to make the change. I simply sit back and facilitate. They're the ones that create the results, not me. Otherwise, you're creating this codependent relationship that's not actually empowering them at all.
Yeah, because then it just becomes like, I suppose, a mothering, smothering type situation. Because if you're like, you know, have you done your homework? Have you done your homework yet? Or like, you know, but you want to give them the, you know, you want them to want to do the work that you're creating for them as well. Asking,
it's one of the biggest. Yeah, exactly. It's one of the biggest things, that it's the experience of it that creates a transformation of that, and that they come wanting this accountability, and I come and go, I'm not going to hold you accountable because I know you can hold yourself accountable. You know, and I trust you to make this change. And you know, embodying that level of self-trust, and in the process and in them, it helps them embody that. And yeah, I don't need them to want me. There's a lot of coaches out there that create this codependent relationship with the client, where the client feels they need the coach. And for me, it's very much about making sure they know they don't need me. They can desire, they don't need, they'll still create the results, but they can desire the extra support if they want it.
After you work with someone for 6 months, what's the goal? Do you wanting them to, I suppose, to not need you, or then you just go to like the next level if they do like another round of work? What's the general time frame of like length of relationship that you have with a client?
Yeah, it's a definite mix. So I've had a couple of clients that have been with me for 18 months, and interestingly they were with me from the very beginning of my business, and they just both finished up, and both because we had these conversations where I go, you're ready to ready to fly. No, they've both more than doubled their salaries in that time that we've worked together. They've both absolutely like just mind-blowing results in just their feelings about themselves, their intimate relationships, their relationships with their family, their self-confidence. And the money is just a side symptom. It's just a really easy way to kind of, it's they internally, and then the external world catches up, and often it's the money reflects that. But yeah, it's a mix. So a lot of the clients too, we come to the end of the time and it feels good. It's usually intuitive, and we have a conversation and go, how do you feel? Do you feel complete? Do you want to focus on something more? Do you want to look at a grander vision? What's going on for you? But yeah, it's a bit of a mix, to be honest.
Cool.
Nice.
So what's your life legacy that you want to leave on your time on this beautiful earth?
Oh, it's such a beautiful question. And it's funny because I feel like I often question this, yet I always come back to the same thing. It's often expressed in a different way. But really, if I ground myself into it, it's helping women really see their power that I see, their power as women, and recognizing that power and learning how to express that power and living in a way that feels fulfilling for them, and really owning their desires and living in alignment with that, and getting to show up for their lives as their best selves. Because I think so many women are living in these cages and boxes, and they have so much potential. And then also as a whole, like seeing more of the harmony between men and women in the world. And one of the other really big things I'm super passionate about is learning to live with more soul, especially in cities. Like really, I have a really strong connection to nature. I always have had a really profound connection with nature. So really helping people come back to that and live in alignment with something greater than this material crap that they're distracted with in every day. So yeah, the harmony of both, feminine power, women living fulfilled lives, and everyone living for soul.
Oh, I love that.
That's really beautiful.
So if I feel like I might know the answer to this question based on what you've just said, but we ask all our guests this. If you could have a billboard anywhere in the world, where would it be, and what would your message be?
Oh, goodness me. Gosh, where would it be, and what would the message be? Oh, I find this to be a really challenging question. It's what's
back to your last answer.
Yeah, I know. Well, I get all of that.
Yeah. Hey, we didn't say what size the billboard had to be.
Exactly. Do I have a word count?
Yeah. Nope, whatever you want.
I feel like the where it's going to be is even hard. The message that has often come to me, or the question that I like people to ask is, or to explore, is like the truth of who they are. So I feel like it's something in alignment with that. Like I'd love probably for there to be a bit of a call to action to challenge how they see themselves and to ask themselves, what is the truth of who they are?
I like that.
To look deeper, if with beyond the name and the title and the salary and the house, who are you?
Cool. I like that.
Yeah.
Where would you put it? In nature somewhere?
Oh, yeah. No one would see it there.
Well, then you'd be taking all these women to connect back to nature, so they would.
Oh, yeah. Sure, in Times Square in New York, so that lots of people that need to see it can see it. Or
That's where mine is. That's where I put mine. Yeah, mine is love in New York Times Square. What was yours again, Danny?
Mine was a little bit like everyone's been so altruistic, and like, so I'm a musician. I was like, I just would love to see my music in Times Square and all those big major cities being promoted. So.
But all your songs and music have beautiful messages, so
Yeah. Well, I suppose it would be really beautiful if my music connected with that many people. So yeah.
Well, I love your message. So asking people to think deeper to who they really are. Yeah, that's really cool. Awesome.
And I said, I'm a musician, but we love to ask some music-based questions as well towards the end. So these kind of bit more rapid fire. What's the first album you bought?
It was Michael Jackson, History.
Oh, that's a great one.
Yeah. The second was Tupac, All Eyes on Me.
Love it.
That's so good. And first gig that you went to?
Oh, what was the first gig I ever went to? Oh gosh, I don't actually remember. That's a great question. Yeah, I don't know.
Park Life.
That's all right. You can get back to that one if you want.
Summerfield Days.
Yeah, probably.
Bring back music festivals.
No.
Okay, and what about right now, a tune or an artist that you're just really vibing right now at the moment?
Oh gosh, so many. Who is the one I am thinking of? One specifically. I think with Spotify at the moment, I end up listening to so many different artists. Who's the one that does is it called Movement? And they have Lace and Us. Yeah, that's called Movement. The band's called Movement.
Sweet.
I don't know.
I haven't heard of them. I have to look them up.
Yeah, vibing them.
And if you could get up, and join anyone on stage, at a gig in the world, who would it be?
I'll set the first one that's coming to mind, because I love watching her live, even though I've seen her a couple of times, is Tash Sultana.
Yeah.
So good live. Such a vibe.
Yeah. I would see her in Ocean Alley.
Yes.
Yeah, they're amazing.
Yeah, if I could beat back at Blues Fest basically and have Ziggy, Ocean Alley, and I think Moshiba, last time I saw her at Blues Fest, and she was also incredible. Talk about that's when I was exploring feminine power and watching her. It's oh yeah, there it is.
So cool.
That's the embodiment of it right there.
Yeah. Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time, Alex. It's been...
Now here, unfortunately, again, Zoom failed us and we lost Danny. But thank you so much, Alex, for coming on the show. We so valued your time and all of the words and wisdom you imparted on us. Thanks for listening, everybody, and until next time.
If you loved what you heard today and want to hear more, then don't forget to head over to your chosen platform of choice and subscribe so you can hear more of It's Glow Time. If you loved what you heard today and want to hear more, then don't forget to head over to your chosen platform of choice and subscribe so you can hear more of It's Glow Time.